Alrighty. Hello and welcome back to Murder of Prose. I am your host, eklloydwilliams. JD is not joining me this week because I am reviewing a fantasy novel, and JD doesn't do fantasy novels. Please pardon my voice. I have been sick for the last couple of weeks. Alright. Now, the novel that I'm going to be doing today is City of Bridges. It's flipped here, but you know what? I don't care. I've been so sick the last couple of weeks. I'll find a way to flip it back and make it so that everyone can see it. My overall feelings on this particular book, I wasn't as happy with it as I wanted to be. It was interesting in the ways that it did go, but as far as, let me explain. Okay, so as far as plot, I gave a 7 overall. Because lots of interesting things happened in the plot. That was great. There were all kinds of interesting things, but they all happened so fast. There was no time to pause. There was no time to reflect. There was no time to develop any of the characters because everything just happened all at once. Or not even all at once, just, it was like one thing after the other, after the other, after the other. And I don't know if Andre Jones did that on purpose. I don't know if he got some bad advice. I don't know if his editor shafted him in some capacity. I don't know. But there was so much that just happened, and there was no room for reflection. The things that did happen were interesting, but there was too much of it. There was way too much of it. And it really did feel like a lot of the things that happened inside the plot was just an excuse to give you exposition about characters. Characters I gave a 5. Because for all the things that happened that involved the characters, you didn't really find out anything about them except through exposition that you got from that character about the species or the race or the class to which they belonged. Well, that's kind of tedious. It's a little exhausting, I have to say. Not that it isn't interesting to read about all these different types of characters, or to read about the different cultures that are included in this book. It is a fantasy book, but there are too many different races, there are too many different ethnicities, there are too many, like, to not spend the time exploring them, and to only get brief moments of exposition from each, or from each character as pertains their race, just before you're about to see the physical capacities of that particular being put on display in a fight. Like, that's how it felt. Like, there's the characters, objectively speaking, like from a world building developmental standpoint, severely underdeveloped, but the relationships were severely underdeveloped too. And there was a lot of importance put on these relationships, and you had no idea who any of these people are. Like, you're supposed to, your main character has one loyal sidekick. Well, that's great. We don't ever see, just them inside their own heads. Not really. Um, there's not, like, there's this one bit in the book where there's, like, they spend a whole week. One of them is unconscious and then the other is unconscious. So there's like an entire week where they're, one is looking after the other, and they're in a cave system with these wyverns, and that's all you know for a week. That's all you know, is that one was unconscious and then the other one did something and now they're unconscious and there are wyverns and that's it. Like, there's a lot that you could do with that week that never happened, or you just never got to see it. And again, I don't know if that was because Andre got some really bad advice from a shitty editor, or if it just didn't occur to him that it would be an interesting thing to put in, which it absolutely would have. I don't know why he didn't, but it would have been like those moments of quiet are a great way to reflect on the nature of a friendship or a relationship, the nature of the place you're in, the nature of the beings that surround you, whether they're mythical or whether they're very common creatures like human beings. It was a really lost opportunity, and honestly, I'm still not over it. I finished this book back in December, and I'm not over it. I'm not happy about it. I'm still unhappy. Um, the loyalty that's assumed without ever exploring those relationships. That's another thing that really got to me. Like, there's this character that we meet early on for about 2 pages. Her name is Jade. And, what's her name? Liani is deeply loyal to this person and owes her everything, and we only know this because Liani says so. We have no idea what their relationship is like. We have no idea why Liani is loyal to her. Now that does come up later, but like we don't get to see their relationship at all. It like at all. Um, and it's things like that really just keep the characters from developing the way they could develop. Now, maybe they'll grow more in the next book because this is part of a series, but I do feel like we've started off on a back foot, which does not give me hope, unfortunately. Now, I don't want to assume that they're static characters. I supposedly there's more to them than meets the eye, but that's a bold assumption to make with such minimal evidence to support it. Style. Style, I gave. What did I give? Style. I gave style a 5. It's a bit blocky. He's a blocky writer. He's blocky with the sentences. That I do remember. Like, there was no reason for some of those sentences to be the way they were. Like, it was disjointed in a lot of ways. It left you feeling kind of not quite in the moment with the character, but also it gives the feeling, short sentences like that do give the feeling of there being a different kind of energy to the story, or to at least to a scene, if that's how you decide to put them in. And sometimes it works for action. It only works in arguments or in action. Now, it felt like the whole thing was just action and exposition. Action and exposition. Like, every info dump action. You know, it's exposition fight scene, exposition fight scene, exposition fight scene. Like, that's the pattern of the story, and it's very tiring. It not in a tedious kind of way, like it actually just exhausts you as a reader. And that's fine if that's how you're going to do it, but I don't think that particular method works within a fantasy book or a fantasy novel. I don't think it works very well at all. Just because it begins to feel less like a well-crafted world, and it begins to feel more like, um I don't dude, I don't even know. It just, you can't really emotionally connect to any part of a story when it's put together like that. Um Concept and execution, I think I gave concept a 5 and execution a 1. Because it is a really interesting idea. It's a really, really interesting idea, especially once you get to the end. Like, it does actually seem, it's marketed as fantasy, but once you get to the end, it feels more sci-fi fantasy, which I am all for. I am all for crossing genres. Um, but his execution was just not good. Like, it's a great concept. It is a great concept. And if you have the stamina to get through it, because it's just action. So if you have the stamina to get through it, by all means read it, because like, as an idea, it is pretty good. Um but I do feel like especially with the big reveal about three of the minor characters, they're supposed to be integral to the plot, but you see so little of them, and you see so few references to them, that when that big reveal is made, it feels kind of like it's out of left field. Wait, who are these people really, and why do I give a shit about them? Like, I know one of them is pretending to be the ruler of the city, and I know that two of them got a bunch of farmers together for apparently no reason. Um, what I need, there needs to be, for a reveal like that, for a twist like that to work, it needs more of, it needs more misdirection. And there wasn't enough direction at all for it to be, it's just like a sort of, it's not, I don't even know if it's laying the foundation, because there wasn't much. Usually when you lay a foundation, like, there's a lot more information that goes with it. There wasn't hardly any information, so I don't really know. Point is, execution was a 1. um um no, with structure I gave him overall a 5. um and it was really just because of the end. It was, structure is what, you know, the quality of the structure is what is like how well everything ties together. Is it all connected, in an appropriate way, or in at least a feasible way? And the answer to that in this case is yes. Everything is connected, because everything that happens is directly related to something that came before it. In this case, info dump action, info dump action. Like, if as soon as one action sequence ends, you're going to be told to go from this place to meet another character, and then you're going to get an exposition, and then there's going to be an action scene, and because of that action scene, now we're going to end up going to a different character. It's the same. It's the same, formula all throughout the story. So I can't really dock points for that, because it's a solid way to write at least a fantasy novel, I would think. Um, that being said, it's, that's just putting it together. That's just the stuff. Um, the thing that really made me pull points off of it was that bit in the desert where there was these two of these characters who are supposed to be so integral to the plot. Two of these characters got gathered together, a whole village of people, a few villages worth of people, I think. You know, I think if I remember correctly, it was either several hundred or several thousand. I think it was several thousand. Um, to fight with this, I'm unclear if it's a pest or if it's a malicious magical being. I'm not really sure what. It might be a cross between the two. Um, but they're all there and nothing comes of it. Like it's a big dud of a setup. When you gather that many people in one place, something has to happen that involves all of those people, because otherwise it's just a big disappointment. Obviously you don't have to, but it's not great to not. I know that's a weird way to put it. I would get way more specific about it, but I don't want to spoil this for anybody who does want to read it. And I do encourage people to read it. Like it is worth reading. I would recommend it for teenagers myself. I don't, because that's just the kind of story that it is. That has nothing to do with structure. That's just an aside. Sorry for being a little all over the place. I am still kind of sick. Okay. Moving on to diction, and I am going to try to get through this because I am still kind of sick and I don't want to wear out my voice. Moving on to diction. Diction I gave a 7. It was passable. Like it wasn't as bad as it could have been. It's not the worst thing I've ever read, but I would have liked to see at least a little bit more unique colloquialisms, unique to that world that Jones was creating. As it was, there were far too many colloquialisms from the present day and way too many campy references to pause. Like, you can do without the references to pause. I strongly encourage you to avoid referencing pause. As much. That's just my take on it. Like they felt a little shoehorned. But again, that's just a personal opinion. Formatting, I gave a 10 because there's nothing out of the ordinary. It was, clearly done by somebody who's done it before, or who at least has a very good eye for it. Better eye than I do, anyway. Length, I gave a 1 because for all the reasons that I've already mentioned. Because if you're going to have a world this complex, and if you're going to have a world and a story that is based around the existence of and the interaction of varying races and classes and ethnicities and things like that, and there are going to be that many of them, if there are so many of them that you have to put an appendix in the back, and he did. Like, there is one. I'm just trying to make. Okay. If there are so many of them that you have to have, a section of the book devoted to defining them and reminding everybody of what they are, there needs to be more with them, and there needs to be more about them. And as it stands now, the way this book was put together, everything was kind of like it was just a passing glance at what's available as a character. And that's not great for telling a fantasy story. It doesn't really give you a whole lot to work with. Now, he does say in the author's note that he wrote this based on a board game, or yeah, I think it was a board game that he was developing when he was younger, or something like that. In which case, like, I get that the point is not necessarily the story, but I mean, fuck it, dude, come on. Unless the board game is widely available, just flesh out the story. Quotability, I think I ultimately gave a 0. I did ultimately give it a 0, because the only really quotable thing from this was Slistorf's balls, and you have no idea who the fuck that is, why the fuck Slistorf's balls are important, or indeed why it has to be said. Like, how did that come to be a thing? God damn it became a thing for a reason, but what this I don't understand, and it's never explained. I'm hoping it's explained in the next book, and I am considering getting the next book. Satisfaction, I gave a 4 overall. It was underwhelming and disappointing. It was a date with a lot of potential, but that held itself back from being all that it could be. It was a lost connection that could have been a great love. All in all, really. And I do genuinely mean that. Like, it is worth the read. It is definitely worth the read. Especially if you've got some younger kids who, I wouldn't go too young, like no one under 12, because there is some language in it, and there is some violence. There's a lot of violence, actually, but some of it's pretty nasty. So I would say, your 12 to 16-year-olds, maybe 17-year-olds that might be into it, but like, because it is worth the read, and it is a fun world to be in. Just, for me personally, I ultimately gave it that middling score, just because I want more out of my fantasy books than what that gave me. But again, that's just personal preference. So overall, I'm going to try to do a JD here and be really, really quippy with my score. I gave it 53 severed cattails out of 100. Hopefully that, I don't fucking know. It's just 53 out of 100. There you go. That said, definitely go buy it. Like, do definitely buy it, because it is worth it. It's a little bit frustrating and a little bit exhausting, but it is worth the price. It is worth the read. And now I'm gonna go, because my voice is tired and my nose is very runny and I want some tea. All right, thanks for tuning in, gang. This has been E.K. Lloyd Williams, your great disappointment, signing off.